In today's episode, we're thrilled to welcome Carolyn Roach, CHRO at XPO. Carolyn leads HR for one of the largest logistics companies in North America, navigating a workforce that spans corporate offices to frontline drivers. But her approach to leadership is anything but traditional. From finance to fiber optics, Wall Street to warehouse floors, Carolyn's career has been defined by purposeful pivots and bold moves into industries she knew little about but learned to lean in. In this conversation, we explore what it means to show up with authenticity across radically different workforces, how Carolyn and her team are redefining talent strategy with a field-first mindset, and why she believes the best HR leaders today must be equal parts strategist, operator, and storyteller. We also talk about AI, where she's at on the journey, how she's encouraging her team to experiment without fear, and what it takes to truly empower employees with this technology. If you've ever wondered how to lead with authenticity in an industry that's still evolving, or how to stay grounded while driving bold cultural change, this one's for you. Let's jump right in. All right, Carolyn, it's great to see you. Thank you for joining us on the Radical Innovators podcast.
It's great to be here, Frank. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm very humbled to be one of your guests today.
Well, when I saw the top CHRO list and I see your name next to people like Lucian's, it's, I'm the one that's certainly grateful to have you on. So thank you for carving out some time.
Absolutely.
Would love to hear, just as you kind of look back, number one, what are some of the biggest obstacles you either overcame or some of the biggest decisions you had to make to get into this role? And then what's currently setting you up for success as you continue to build the team out at XPO?
Excellent. So as I think back around my career, Frank, I think I've been really blessed with a bit of luck, right? A bit of circumstance, and then maybe some purposeful decisions, right, along the way. I'm a bit unique in the sense that I've worked in HR for 20 some years, but in 4 or 5 different companies and different industries. I started my background in finance. So I was a finance undergrad. I had a father who was in HR. And so my dad always pushed me to kind of step into his shoes. And I probably knew I would be a career HR person, but he also pushed me to do finance and business first. His philosophy was you'll be a better HR leader later in life if you can understand, how a company makes money, why customers behave the way they do, what motivates people, et cetera, from a financial side, which was great advice. So as I moved out of finance and then into HR, I think some of my differentiating moments or defining moments were honestly changing industries. So moving every 4 to 6 years to a completely different industry that I knew nothing about.
And how intentional was that?
To hone those skills. Sorry.
How intentional were those? Because I think you think about it, sometimes that's serendipitous, but it sounds like, and I recall from another conversation, I think you were very intentional about wanting to make sure you did that.
Yeah, I think, once I did the first one was probably the most intentional. I had been offered the opportunity to work at Bank of America Merrill Lynch for almost 7 years. And I had a wonderful, wonderful foundation of the purest HR and leadership development you could ever get, surrounded by fantastic people that are probably still in your network and community today. Yeah. But I knew I didn't want to be in financial services forever. That wasn't my ultimate goal. And so that was a purposeful decision, to switch industries and go to work in something completely different, to go work at Corning, glass manufacturer, science, technology, optical fiber, cable, nothing to do with deposits and retail banking. And then after that, it got easier, Frank, right? Then as recruiters would call or mentors would call, or I got to a point where I wanted to do something different, it felt a little bit more comfortable to trust myself that I can do these HR skills kind of agnostic of what industry I choose.
Which is, it's interesting because it's totally different sets of workforces that you've managed as you think about that role, and then particularly given your current role today.
Yes, absolutely. I've been, on the trading floor, sort of talking about succession planning with bond traders. And then I've been, on a dock with an hourly workforce, just understanding why, their benefits are so important to their families, or why they need certain shifts that they can work at night or they can't work at night. That flexibility and that realization that at the core, people just want to be heard and respected, and they want authentic leadership from the top. is sort of that underpinning, right, that goes through no matter what type of workforce you're faced with as an HR professional.
Yeah. I'm curious in terms of, if I think about the organization you work for now, as a woman in an organization, which, and I don't know the exact statistics, but I assume is dominated by males, and just based on the profile of many of your drivers, and I see your trucks quite often on the roads. What does that look like for you, and how has that how have you encountered the any sort of ways of navigating leading change, and sort of also being an inspiration to help bring more women into the organization?
Yeah, I would agree. Logistics is not traditionally known for gender diversity, nor is probably the trucking industry, which is a subset, right, of logistics. I think because I had been in a number of different industries, that didn't scare me. I didn't think about that when I got the call about XPO. I thought, wow, this is a really interesting company. It's a really great experience, and it's a critical part to our supply chain across, the U.S. and into Canada, and even when we operate over in Europe. I think when it comes to gender diversity in this industry, you're right. Most of the truck drivers are male. Most of our dock workers, our forklift operators are male. But then you get into a variety of jobs that we have, everything from finance professionals, obviously HR professionals, customer service reps and managers, pricing analysts, salespeople, and we have a nice gender balance, right? We're closer to about 45% in our professional roles that are females that are shining, in this industry. And I'd be remiss to say that we don't have females that are out there winning national truck driving championships and winning Master Tech, which is a national competition for technicians and maintenance professionals. So we have them. They are our superstars. And I would say, just as a female, you can't be scared of the industry. You have to be bold in that choice and think about the opportunity that lies ahead of you rather than, hey, I might be, the only woman on the screen at a particular event. I don't think we can be afraid of that. I think we have to lean into that a little bit.
Yeah. Well, my daughters are a few years away from me requesting an internship, but I'll keep that in mind now.
Anytime. You just have to point out our trucks on the road, right? They're big white trucks with red XPO letters. So my kids like to, pull down the horn, although sometimes they're getting a little embarrassed when I wave at them when I drive by.
Well, and to that point, right, you talked about, I think a lot of people, they think XPO and the brand is synonymous with, they see the trucks on the road. But you definitely have a large frontline driven environment, but I'm curious how you're building a talent strategy that's both empowers the corporate and the frontline employees.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think when we think about our talent strategy, first of all, we have to be nimble because our business is very cyclical. What our customers' needs from us are continuing to evolve, right? What's happening in the macro right now in terms of tariffs, in terms of uncertainty, I think with the economy, we are continuing to adjust what we can do and how we can help our customers, solve their business problems, day in and day out. And so I think from a talent strategy, we have to also be nimble. We have to look at what do we need from a senior leadership perspective. So do we have, the right executive talent who can sort of navigate, I think, Frank, between presenting in a boardroom, presenting to investors, and then being very present and authentic in the field. That is super important to us. So even myself, right, I have to be able to switch from a conversation like this, again, to a conversation, in a break room that is authentic and real. And so we look for that in our hiring and our succession planning, in our development programs and what we're asking of our senior leaders. And then we also have to have a talent strategy that is very practical and thinks about what I would consider like proximity. So we need to make sure that my HR team is out in the field, understanding who our best operators are to be able to take on that next frontline management position, potentially grow into a service center manager, or maybe even a regional vice president. And what is that succession planning and pipeline and talent strategy almost from the ground up that matches, right, what we're doing, from the top down. We had a recent story where, an RVP, which is a big, a regional job, he departed from the organization, and we were really excited to be able to internally promote somebody who came from what we called our field management trainee program. So 15 years ago, right, he came into the organization as a frontline manager and has worked his way up through both informal and formal development programs. And it was wonderful to be able to announce him, as our new RVP, we love to share success stories on, when we think about our talent planning and our talent strategy.
Yeah, of course, right? Everybody loves those kinds of stories. Give inspiration for the people in those newly frontline roles, the many that you guys do offer. Think about then. You shared a story, and if we need to edit this one out, I think it's more around. I think a lot about XPO and the culture, and this story that you shared around your CEO giving out his phone number to drivers. And just sort of that willingness to be able to take in that frontline feedback for a very large organization, and for someone that senior to consider even making themselves available, and then to the point where maybe getting contacted on the weekend. But I think it's such a key point around how an organization sets the culture and the tone from the top. And it sounds like you're doing that. If you think about the way you need to handle such a diverse population, is that something that you'd say is an organizational wide priority that really does trickle down from your CEO?
I do think so. I mean, Mario himself is a great example of that nimbleness and that authenticity to be able to have very challenging, detail-oriented, strategic conversations and then being very personable in the moment. It is true. He gives out his cell phone number. We all do, right? We all are expected to be very present in the field. I spend probably an equal amount of time sitting here in my, office in Connecticut as I do visiting our service centers, doing what we call roundtables. So these are open forum discussions, right, with a handful of employees. And we just ask, hey, what's going well? What can we fix? What advice do you have? To your point, here's my card. Here's my phone number. Text me anytime. Sometimes we get complaints, and sometimes we get, hey, I had a great route today, or, I was really excited because I participated in the employee stock purchase program for the first time, and I'm creating, longer term wealth for my family. So the feedback you get is phenomenal. It's one thing to take in these texts and these requests and this feedback, but what's really important is this action orientation that we have afterwards, which I think, builds the trust that when we come back the next time, they'll tell us kind of maybe even some more deeper rooted issues that we need to address. It is a cultural expectation here. We don't wait for the formal survey. We do a formal survey once a year, a formal census. We get 85% participation from our hourly teammates, which is amazing. Really, really great. But this informal, recognition and I think conversations that happen over text and over roundtables is really built into kind of who we are and the bread and butter of how we get feedback from our employees.
Yeah, I mean, that right there is a high return practice that so many organizations can take and lift and shift. I think it's the willingness to want to do that and feel those conversations. If I think about, I mean, I'm just naturally, my head is going to what's the worst text you ever got. I won't ask you that. But what's the best one? Because the stock ownership one is amazing, right? I mean, I love hearing stories like that. But I'm curious if there's ever been one, just one text that stands out that was just you screenshot and sent to Mario.
You're going to put me on the spot. I mean, I think, drivers in particular, they feel very honored when they hit 1 million miles or 2 million miles or 3 million miles of safe driving. And that is an impressive statistic. If you think about it, that is, 10, 15, 20, 30 years on the road with no accidents is amazing for these drivers to achieve. And so when we celebrate them, these men and women who achieve that, we'll welcome their families. Sometimes we welcome like local officials, or they even get an escort by a police car or a fire truck. And the drivers, when they text us back and just say, thank you, that was such a moment for my family who has sacrificed, right? Me being away a lot for the last 10, 15, 20 years. But that recognition made me feel so special, and so honored. I want to continue to give back to XPO and to its customers, our customers. Those are the really great texts, right? Those are the ones where, we want to keep those and not think about the bad text you get, right? You want to celebrate those nice moments of recognition.
Talk about the framers, right? The ones that you can send over to Mario and talk about on the leadership team meetings. Those are awesome.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm curious. So a lot of these events that we go to a lot of the same events and we see a lot of the same content. Some of the stuff has been around the evolving role of the CHRO. And a lot of that straddles another topic that comes up constantly around AI and this idea of a chief work officer. Curious the way you're looking at this personally, but also how you're thinking about this, whether it's from your organization or just more broadly.
So if you think about, so I'll answer the sort of more broadly role of the CHRO first, and I'll come back to the AI piece of it. I think this role continues to evolve, right? If we sat here 8 years ago, we didn't know COVID was going to happen, right? And so I think we would have been talking about, we would not have been able to predict, right, the role of HR and the role of an HR leader kind of through that, through those challenging years. Now I think we continue to evolve where we have to be strategic. We also have to be operational, right? We have to be able to navigate through both of those. We have to be comfortable in the kind of unknown, right? Trusting our gut and trusting our instincts, but then also very well versed in data and being able to understand how to make data-driven decisions. I also think the role is shifting because of employee expectations. And I talked a little bit about that, but I think, employees are seeking more transparency, more authenticity, more understanding of why corporate is making decisions, right? Or leaders are making decisions, and they have a lot of choices. They have a lot of choices in terms of pay, in terms of benefits, in terms of industry, in terms of where they work and how they work. So all of that, I think, is this, next level of complexity, for a CHRO and what we're being asked to do each and every day. When it comes to AI, which is obviously a topic, to your point, that we see and we learn about, and we talk about at every conference these days. So me personally, I'm still on my journey. I'm early, right? I will humbly admit that I'm early on my journey. I am learning what the terminology is. I am deliberately speaking with my chief technology officer. We've got a standing one-on-one, and I just ask him to teach me about what are we doing within the business first and foremost, and how we're using AI to make better customer decisions, make better pricing decisions, make operational decisions. And then lastly, what can we do within HR? Because I think, again, I want to lead with business first, and then I want to be a consumer of that technology, sort of as we're coming along. I'm pushing my team. So I'm encouraging and pushing my team if they need licenses for Copilot, or if they need, to go and, to your point, go to a conference and learn themselves. I'm encouraging them to play and to learn, to be curious, to not be scared of it. And I think my team's on a very big spectrum on that, right? I think there are some folks that are leaning in hard, and they're already trying it, and they're embracing it, and they're, using Translate to change their voice on a learning seminar that we're doing, right? They're using different summary technology to create themes out of exit interviews. And then I think I have others that are probably a little bit more hesitant because maybe they're worried about what's going to happen to their own job. And if they don't have to do that administrative work, what do they do instead, right? How do they spend their time instead? And I think that's very natural. I think that happened when we introduced the cell phone. That happened when we introduced a computer. That happened when we introduced internet. So to me, it's another wave of technology, right? That we will all be on a different change curve on. So that's kind of where I am. I'm early in my journey within our HR function. Again, we are trying things. We are trying more, I would say, point in time solutions. So where do we have a problem, or where do we have a bunch of manual work in a process flow, and could we do more like an intervention or use a particular technology there versus a complete overhaul of our function? We are not looking to do that. We don't think that's needed. And we're also trying to be conscious of our employee base, which is primarily not wired, primarily not attached to a computer, primarily not attached to their cell phone or, their email throughout the day. So we can't push too fast on our technology solutions and leave our teammates and our employees behind.
Yeah. Well, and the other part is, you've got a phenomenal network of organizations that are already doing these things. And so if you feel like the Apple strategy of let Samsung test things out and then figure out which things they're going to adopt, you might be able to learn from companies like IBM and Accenture that have been certainly AI forward in what they're doing with HR.
That's right. And I think, sometimes I have a little FOMO, right? I have a little fear of missing out, like I'm behind. But honestly, Frank, aside from the strong technology companies, many CHROs that I speak to and other peers are kind of where we are, right? They're a fast follower. They're early on their journey. They're looking more point in time. They're not out there leading, on the edge. And so that makes me feel a little bit comfortable, right? A little bit more comfortable that actually the majority of the population is probably somewhere in the middle. And we're sitting pretty there. We're feeling pretty good about where we are at the moment.
I think that's right. I don't think there's any one company that's nailing it. I think there's some organizations that are doing great things and aspects, but there doesn't feel like anybody's come up with the full playbook. And if I go back to what you were just sharing, a lot of the work that I'm doing with a group called Radical Innovators, where the partnership for CHROs and CIOs, and it sounds like you're doing this with your CTO, is to start to think about, we roll out all these tools, but how do we actually have the adoption of them? And one of these very AI forward organizations that joined a dinner I hosted a couple weeks ago mentioned a stat. They said only 9% of employees are using the tools of which they've allocated or rolled out the licenses. But when they surveyed that same population, it's actually 77% are using it, just not on their company device. And so this element of trust is there. This element of, to your point, if AI can do these things, does my boss give me more work to do? Does my job go away? Right. So I think there's a lot in terms of how this is communicated and then what the actual outcomes are as a result of the tools being made available and then leveraged.
Yeah, 100%. I just had this conversation with a leader of our sales enablement team last week where we were saying, to your point, we have technology and we are eager to turn it on within our sales platforms that will help our salespeople. They'll have stronger customer buying behavior, insights into customer buying behavior. It can create pitches for you, right? It can create a deck. It can do a lot of the cold calling and the hunting for you.
Yeah.
Which is amazing because you're creating capacity for the salesperson to just come in and probably close more deals, get more revenue, et cetera. But a really good salesperson is probably good at hunting. They're good at cold calling, right? They're good at kind of understanding the customer behavior. So now what is my value and how do we teach our salespeople that you have additional value, you have more value, we're going to unlock different things for you to do. But it's a change management aspect too that we have to think about even within, our 500 or so person sales team here.
Yeah, absolutely. Big behavior change and culture change. I think the organizations that make it feel safe and test these things, celebrate individuals that are using the tools and finding scale, that those are the ones that are going to thrive. I'm curious, what are some of the things that you'd say as an organization, either being led by your team or more broadly, what are some of the things that you're doing that are innovative and driving better outcomes for employees? I know that historically you guys have invested in the frontline education frontline education programs, but curious, like if there's anything newer that you're testing that maybe hasn't proven results, but things that you're excited or proud about.
I think for us, some of it is again making sure that we're listening and responding to what our employees need. Where I think we need to continue to invest and lean in is around our frontline leader population. I think that's a very, very critical job. I've shared with other colleagues that I think it's a critical job across industries and across companies. We put a lot on our frontline managers. And so right now we're actually taking a pause to get closer to the business. So get closer to our operators, get closer to the people that are in those roles or manage their roles, understand, where the gaps are in terms of skills and competencies and behaviors, and then be able to create, I would say, more practical solutions. This is not a population where you can go just sit for 2 days in a training course. Like it's just not, that doesn't work, right, in the way that we work. And so our creative or cutting edge is actually going back to the basics to say, tell me what is challenging in your job. Tell me how we can help you improve those capabilities and skills, because I think it helps with attrition of our hourly workforce. I think it helps with engagement of our hourly workforce. But how do we do that in the flow of work? And that is the innovative solution that we need to figure out. Is that just-in-time training? Is that micro-learning? Is that pushing training out onto different technology solutions, whether that's an iPad or a kiosk or something that's right there in the moment? How can we do that for that frontline leader population? I don't know that we've solved it yet, but that is an area where I think can really differentiate the success of XPO and the success of our employees here. And it's really, really important, right? I think that group is sometimes forgotten, and I think that's an area that we need to lean into a little bit more.
Yeah. Well, one organization and one leader that I know does this really well is Donna Morris at Walmart, and all the things that they've done to make education available to frontline employees. and sort of to your point, in the flow of work, because they're not going to be able to pull these people out, and they need to be able to learn on their own hours, because it's tough based on the shifts that they're working and the other demands that they have both at home. So
That's right.
happy to, I'm sure you probably know some of this already, but I'm happy to share more of that in another time. Just want to be respectful of your time. If I think about your mentorship or sort of your legacy, there's certainly been probably some people that have helped you, that you know, a couple, 2 to 3 people at least, you would pinpoint and say these people were critical in my success. First part, any one of those people you'd want to shout out now, and then 2, what are you doing to try to give back and try to proactively mentor? I know it's going to be challenging given the size and scale of your workforce. Been curious if there are any practices that you're trying to proactively engage with to make sure that you're giving back.
Excellent. So I'd be remiss if I didn't mention my dad, which I mentioned at the beginning, because he was probably the first pure mentor that I've had. I'll do a couple shout outs. So Chris Collins, who's a professor at Cornell, I would advise folks that if you have a teacher, whether that's an elementary school teacher, middle school, college professor, etc., I think it's good to get a different perspective, like whether that an educational, a theoretical, a thinking perspective, which I think our teachers can often offer us. So I spend a good bit of time still with Chris, and he's been a good mentor and also sponsor and supporter of me throughout my career. Amy Kazmerzak is another one who, she was a previous manager of mine at 2 different organizations and sort of pulled me along and then pushed me. It was like, I'm going to pull you along, and then when you are ready, I am going to push you out of that nest. And I'm truly grateful for the opportunities that she provided for me throughout my time. I think the advice, Frank, that I would say, how am I doing that? How am I doing it more today? And advice for others. I guess the advice would be, you have to go out and network, and you're going to find mentors again in different parts of your life, families, friends, again, teachers, colleagues, previous managers. Other CHROs. So Kate Gebo has become a good friend from United Airlines. I met her very early on in my CHRO career, and she was super open with me about challenges and, what I should be thinking about even in my first year. So I think you need to go out and network. Frank is the king of networking teammates. I thought I was the Kevin Bacon of HR. I think Frank is the Kevin Bacon of HR, because everybody knows you and you do an awesome job at connecting people and enriching their lives and their professional and personal lives, which is awesome.
Thank you.
How am I trying to do it? So one thing I learned a long time ago was you have to give back and you have to pay it forward. And so if, as people ask me to spend time with them, whether they are interns, whether they are other CHROs, whether they are my neighbor's daughter wants to get into HR, out of medical and into HR. So I've been trying to help her with her resume and network her. You have to do that, right? You have to be able to give back. And then you also have to always tell people to go introduce you to 2 more others. So like if you and I were meeting lunch, I would ask you, Frank, can you introduce me to 2 other people, right? Because that's going to be that multiplier effect that's going to help us all broaden our network even more. So I try to introduce people to 2 others whenever I get the chance to do that.
Well, Kate is actually going to be at the dinner I'm hosting next week in Chicago, so I'll be sure to tell her that you got a shout out on a podcast that's yet to be published.
Please do, and give her a big hug for me. That would be great.
Well, hey, I want to thank you for spending time with us. This has been phenomenal. I'm excited to hopefully see you throughout the summer, and I hope you have a phenomenal summer with your kids and your husband down at the lake.
Thank you. Well, again, I really appreciate the offer to come join you. I wish you all the best. Again, you are a fantastic connector, which I think is so important. My other piece of advice is I was often very competitive, and I think I've realized that you don't need to be as competitive. You can be more supportive of others as they're, vying for opportunities or reaching out or growing in their HR career. And thank you for doing that, right? Thank you for helping us connect and collaborate across. We share a lot of the same challenges as HR professionals. And so I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today and look forward to continuing to give back however I can.
It's way more fun when we can all win together.
That's right.
Awesome. Thanks, Carolyn.
Excellent, Frank. Great to see you. Thank you so much.